All right, once again, folks, the Cine-Geezers are in their respective houses. My name is Mike Dobbs, and the gentleman that you see with the great posters is Stephen Arbisset. Hey, Steve.
Hello, all. I wanted to make sure you could see the amazing ad campaign that United Artists had put together for their reissue of A Fistful of Dollars and for a few dollars more. And it might clue you as to my current state of affairs, but I'll just leave it at that. I'll just leave it at that.
Well, you also have the Dunwich Horror over there, which is a relatively early H.P. Lovecraft adaptation.
Exactly. Yeah. The second one from American International Pictures. Well, the third, if we count The Haunted Palace, which we should. Um, this is the one sheet poster that prompted the great poster artist Reynold Brown to quit painting poster art for motion picture studios. In a book on Reynold Brown, they quote him saying, "When I had to hide the material from my kids, I figured it was all over." So,
Well, I guess it was a good thing he never got into doing posters for X-rated porn then.
well, this is as close as he got, Mike. So there you go.
And
And over to my left, your viewer's right, is the amazing Invasion of the Blood Farmers, which is near and dear to the heart of all farming New England families. So
yes, it's a tenuous connection, but it's a connection.
it's a connection nonetheless. I just had to dress things up. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Cine-Geezers. And Mike, I think we're going to call this our personal ballyhoo session. Shall we
Yes,
call it that?
sure.
And what is ballyhoo, Mike, for those who don't know?
Ballyhoo is meanings to sell something with enthusiasm, hyperbole, bullshit. Uh,
And burning at both ends if you can take it. Yes, this is
that's
ballyhoo.
exactly that is it exactly. Um, you know, at some point, um, after I do the book I'm going to talk about today, and then after I do the Richard and Alex Gordon book, which is next, I want to do a book called Ballyhoo: How They Used to Sell the Movies. Um, because Steve and I grew up at a time where we caught we were growing up at a time where there was still such a thing as ballyhoo. There were guys, and of course the absolute emperor of ballyhoo was for us was William Castle.
Oh yes, yeah, definitely William Castle.
But if there
Although I'm too young to have actually experienced the William Castle ballyhoo in a theater.
right, me
Um,
too.
so
But the secondary prince, at least in my book, would have been Dave Friedman.
oh yeah, and I was around to catch some of Dave Friedman's ballyhoo. So
And I just found the transcript for my interview with Dave Friedman. So
oh, excellent.
Dave would definitely figured into the whole ballyhoo thing. And
I
for those of you who don't know who Dave Friedman is, he produced dirty movies.
he
He
did
quit at hardcore porn. He didn't like hardcore porn, but he produced things called Nudie Cuties. He produced The Roughie.
Roughies,
Um,
yeah.
he did films like Sex Family Robinson,
She Freak.
The Long Swift Sword
I
of
knew you were going there. The Long Swift Sword of Siegfried.
right,
And that I think that's the movie that introduced Sybil Danning only under her actual name.
right.
So
It did introduce Sybil Danning. Trader Horny.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
And the film he made a lot of money off of, but took his name off. Ilsa She-Wolf of the SS. There was a movie even too extreme for David Friedman, the
that
man, the
it
man who
doesn't.
produced Blood Feast, 2000 Maniacs, and Color Me Blood Red. Did not put his name on Ilsa She-Wolf of the SS. So
You know, I one of us because we got Dave and I, Steve and I got to meet Dave, um, uh, and he's a trip. He's a trip. One of us should have asked him that. What was it about Ilsa that you couldn't handle?
yeah, I was afraid to go there. You don't want to get that familiar with somebody that you don't really know. So
That's true.
in terms of ballyhoo, I even reached into my collection, Mike, to I won't do a show and tell, but just to show people that Ballyhoo went beyond just what theater owners did. I have in my collection a three-dimension entertainment world magazine
Ooh.
that sold for 25 cents in the early 50s. It came with its own 3D glasses and even the ads. There's an ad on the back for VSR Three Feathers, a uh, what is this? A whiskey? Yeah, it looks like a whiskey. And it's in 3D, even the ad, but it's a promotion for 3D movies, 3D theater, anything 3D is in three-dimensional entertainment. And this too was a form of ballyhoo that used to be very prevalent. Not any longer. Doesn't exist today.
No, I'm afraid not. So today's ballyhooic theme is we're going to talk about our favorite subjects, which is whatever we're working on, whatever rabbit holes our research lead us into. Steve and I are both very, very weak men because when a rabbit hole manifests itself in front of us, we always go down it,
That's
regardless.
weakness, or is this bravery, Mike? Courage. This is courage.
Okay, it may be courage. In my case, it will take me away from what I'm supposed to be doing. So I view
Oh,
it.
okay. I'm guilty too. All right.
So we'll go alphabetically, which means you first. Tell people,
What, like homeroom?
huh?
Like homeroom in school? You
Absolutely.
know, you and I would have been in the same homeroom with B and D being our last name. So, okay, I accept. All right. I have been going down the rabbit hole of continuing to research cryptid cinema, which is a genre that has occasionally been written about in terms of Bigfoot and Sasquatch movies, but not in terms of, as I see it, an entire genre. And this is a genre that I've been trying to explore via book projects. So far, I've gotten two books out: Cryptid Cinema, and the copious subtitle of this particular first book. Mike, you're big on subtitles too, I noticed in your books. This is Meditations on Bigfoot, Bayou Beasts, and Backwoods Boogeymen of the Movies. Alliteration being, a necessary component. So with this first book, I tried to chart the perimeters of cryptid cinema, including films that others might not consider cryptid films per se, like some of the H.P. Lovecraft films, the Dunwich Horror included, films like Kevin Smith's Tusk, that kind of thing. And then the second book that's come out thus far in the series is Cryptid Cinema, a Boggy Creek primer. And this is a one-shot overview of where the genre began in the late 1890s, right up to 1972. And I stop at 1972 because Charles B. Pierce's surprise box office hit, The Legend of Boggy Creek, it became the ground zero of cryptid cinema as people understand it today. I include in this genre not only nonfiction cryptids, creatures that are reported via sightings and evidence like footprints. This would include the Loch Ness Monster, Champ up in Lake Champlain, our local state monster, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, the Yeti, Thunderbirds, and so on. But the genre also embraces completely imaginary cryptids. King Kong, the neo dinosaurs still living on a platform, plateau in South America in the Lost World. Um, almost all the kaiju films, as long as they're terrestrial creatures like Godzilla, Rodan, and so on. Any film that presents as real within its narrative that there's some sort of unknown species of creature fits cryptid cinema. I just caught Death of a Unicorn, and although it goes into a form of magic in its final act, up until that point, it's very much a contemporary cryptid feature.
So did you?
Um,
I got to go see that if I can find it down here.
yeah, I had to drive a ways to catch it. I missed it during its opening week when it was playing, 20 minutes away. I missed that. But I do recommend it. It's pretty good. And we've only had one Academy Award winning cryptid film that won Best Feature, and that was Guillermo del Toro's The Shape of Water,
Yep.
which is, to my mind, the perfect remake of The Creature from the Black Lagoon. It's the film that Universal could never execute in their repeated botched attempts to remake the 1953 Creature from the Black Lagoon. Um, so cryptid cinema has really come into its own. There's entire TV series about, searching for Bigfoot and so on streaming, and prior to the streaming era on cable. Um, it's really become a staple genre, and yet no one has looked at it as a genre per se. So that's the rabbit hole I've been going down, and I can talk about how deep that rabbit hole gets in a moment. um, these two books, by the way, are available print on demand on Amazon.com. I have the same reservations many of you probably harbor concerning Amazon, but they are the 800-ton gorilla in the room. They're the largest book distributor on planet Earth, and doing them print on demand has made it viable for me to complete and publish these kind of projects. I should also hasten to add that these have been done in very close collaboration with fellow author and researcher and book designer extraordinaire Tim Paxton out of Ohio. Tim designed both of these books, and we're working on a third book right now um, in the Cryptid Cinema series. I've also begun serializing a later incarnation of Cryptid Cinema. I'm writing a long form textbook on the genre. And one of the chapters is being serialized right now in the magazine Bare Bones, starting with issue number 21. And in this series of articles, which will run over 4 issues of Bare Bones, I get into TV Westerns, which will be my segue into what you're researching, Mr. Dobbs. um, I grew up, and Mike, you grew up at a time when Westerns were everywhere on television. I mean, it is hard to communicate to anyone in the 21st century how omnipresent television Western TV series were, particularly in the late 50s and early 60s when we were kids. I can't remember a night when there wasn't a Western or 2 or 3 Western series on television, and that's when we only had 3 networks: ABC, NBC, and CBS. And why am I writing about TV Westerns? Because almost every TV Western series had at least one episode with a fake cryptid in it. I'm talking about Death Valley Days, in which reports of a monster leads settlers to find that the monster is actually a renegade camel that was left over from a botched attempt that the U.S. Cavalry made to import camels to use in their desert outposts. And that, being on Death Valley Days, was based on a true story. I'm talking about Steve McQueen's series Wanted Dead or Alive, in which reports of a monster trampling villages turns out to be Martin Landau, a renegade berserker circus performer who has a trained elephant that he's using to create his own campaign of terror. I'm talking about episodes of TV series like Cheyenne that had an episode called Big Ghost Basin that people still remember today, in which anyone who starts a campfire in the woods is suddenly destroyed, physically demolished by some sort of creature that not only kills the person building the campfire, but puts out the campfire. And it's only seen for the bulk of the series with 2 little pinpoint eyes that appear back in between the trees. Terrified an entire generation of kids that were watching Cheyenne. It turns out, kids, it's not Bigfoot. It's a fire-scarred grizzly bear that, when it was a cub, was caught in a forest fire, and that's why it hates campfires. So almost every TV series had at least one, sometimes more than one, fake cryptid episode. And the reason I went down this rabbit hole, OG Michael Dobbs, who understands rabbit holes, was these TV shows created the storytelling template that almost every Bigfoot and Sasquatch movie afterwards followed in one way or another. And it also laid down all the common tropes that appear in almost every cryptid film, involving mysterious footprints, barely glimpsed creatures that might be real, might not be real, um, trampling, trampled victims or victims who are discovered destroyed in some way by an unnamed creature in ways that forensic pathologists can't identify. All of this was laid out in these TV westerns of the 50s and 60s, going back to The Adventures of Wild Bill Hickok, um, Cisco Kid. I mean, really early stuff. So that's the rabbit hole that all of you can read in bare bones. Issue 21 is available now, again, via print on demand on Amazon. We're doing I'm proofing the galleys for issue 22 right now, and there'll be 2 more installments that follow.
Wow.
That's what that's what I've been up to.
Well, you know what fascinates me about, especially about the discussion about TV westerns with cryptids. What fascinates me is that the whole interest in cryptids, in my mind, runs parallel to alternative histories. Um, uh, we would be remiss, maybe we can get him in on an episode or two of our mutual friend Joe Citro, who has spent a good chunk of his life investigating a number of different things that fall under alternative histories. And in fact, he has taken you and me to numerous places
Yeah.
in England where there are artifacts um, that defy easy categorization, defy easy placement into traditional historical narratives. Um, and it just, I think the reason that cryptids and the work that you're doing is so fascinating is because I think deep down most people understand we don't understand everything about this world in which we live. There are still things to discover. There is things that happened in the past. I mean, just look what was in the headlines in the last week about this company that has brought back dire wolves.
Right. And they didn't actually bring them back. They found a way to genetically simulate dire wolves.
Right.
These are not actually resurrected prehistoric creatures or prehistoric life forms. But yeah, it was everywhere in the news, not just in the scientific press like Nature magazine, but every place. It blew up huge. I'm willing to bet we'll soon see a Sci-Fi Channel dire wolf movie if there aren't already 2 or 3 in the works.
Fred Orland Ray has already made one.
All right, Fred. I can't wait to see it. Yes,
He
yes.
put the graphic up for it on his Facebook page. He's already made a dire wolf movie.
A dire wolf movie.
God bless Fred.
I am so proud of Fred. That is amazing. I will be watching it. And if it's possible for me to buy it, I will buy it on physical media because I am a physical media kind of guy. So,
but I think that the reason that we still talk about Bigfoot or Champ or the Loch Ness Monster or every other day someone on some web page talks about whether or not they actually can find the photo of the Thunderbird in the Arizona newspaper.
right, right.
All of that stuff is because I think instinctively we understand that we don't understand everything. And this is a natural for movie makers, to make a Bigfoot horror film of some sort or to make a Loch Ness Monster horror film of some sort. I think just plays into this human nature that we've got of understanding that we don't understand.
I think that's part of it, and I also think part of it is well, it functions on 2 levels. Part of my love for monsters and drawing monsters and telling monster stories and watching monster stories is monsters are a way of giving form to the fears and taboos that we don't have a shape for. It becomes a way to communicate about forbidden things or uncomfortable things. You put them in the form of a monster, it has a physical manifestation, and it's a way of playing with it or grappling with it or allowing yourself to be scared by it in a way that it can be seen, because there's so much in our day-to-day lives where things are terrifying us that we cannot see, that we have no real grasp of, that we can't wrap our heads around. Um, I think the other level is, and this is why I fixate on the 1972 Legend of Boggy Creek as the turning point, is prior to the Legend of Boggy Creek, all these cryptid movies involved extraordinary individuals taking extraordinary trips to extraordinary places, right? Professor Challenger mounts an expedition to go to South America and the Lost World because of a diary that's been found with drawings of living dinosaurs, and he wants to verify it. Carl Denham has been given a map to a mysterious isle that's not on the charts called Skull Island because he's heard of some being there called Kong. And even the ordinary people who are pulled into the orbit of these characters like Challenger and Denham are still going on an extraordinary trip. You have to go away to see a monster, unless you lived in Scotland and you were in easy driving distance of Loch Ness. Most of these stories involved expeditions of some sort. I think the reason Legend of Boggy Creek to me is the turning point is Legend of Boggy Creek was the first film that it was like, oh, you're hanging your clothes out on your clothesline and your kids come running terrified because there's a giant hairy being behind them in the woods. It focused on eyewitness accounts, some recreated in the film, of ordinary people who aren't looking to do anything extraordinary. In fact, these are people who wish they'd never seen the folk monster. These are people who find themselves, you know, in the dramatic finale of Legend of Boggy Creek, under siege in their new home by something that is walking around on the porch, reaching in the screen window when somebody's going to use the bathroom. It changed the whole game into you don't have to go looking for these things. They're in your backyard, and they're in the backyard of many Americans. And that is when it becomes really interesting to me. The fumbling of the ball is almost every Sasquatch Bigfoot movie that was made after Legend of Boggy Creek hadn't learned that lesson. They're all about people mounting expeditions, which eat up the bulk of the film as like a nature documentary,
Right.
going into some remote region in the northwest of North America looking for Bigfoot. And that's not why Boggy Creek surprised and attracted audiences in by the thousands in the 1970s. That film made a mark because it meant you didn't even have to leave your back porch and you might encounter a creature. I love investigating storytelling forms, and that's why I'm fascinated currently with cryptid cinema as a genre. What are the earmarks of this genre? What are the storytelling templates? Where do they come from? Which is why I went down the rabbit hole of TV westerns, in which I discovered, Mike, that TV westerns pretty much followed the exact production pattern of your rabbit hole, the Tom Tyler westerns from the silent era and sound era. Over to you.
Well, that's a very nice segue, Stephen. Let me just ask you one question, though,
Oh, please do.
that some people are going to wonder about this. Um, there is an absolute mini industry of TV reality shows about Bigfoot and other cryptids, as I'm sure you know.
Oh,
There's
yes,
all,
yes.
there's
Yep.
all these shows where, and you're right, the shows are all sizzle and no steak. They're all about the expedition into, well, at random, select a mountainous area in the United States or
Right.
a vast forest. Um, and of course, along the way, we're teased. Did we hear something at night? Was the camp molested during the night? Uh, is there a pair of eyeballs that catch the reflections of the lights at night?
Right. Right.
Um, and there seems to be a never-ending line of these cheaply made pseudo documentaries. I was wondering if you ever want to include those within the context, because you're dealing you're dealing not with documentaries. You're dealing with fiction.
Well, Legend of Boggy Creek is a borderline documentary. I mean,
Okay.
they Charles Pierce went into Folk, Arkansas, interviewed people who live there, managed to convince a few of them to get on camera. So it's a borderline documentary. And yes, I'm very much interested in the documentary form. And in fact, the fourth book in the Cryptid Cinema series, it was originally going to be part of a huge 400-page book called The Boggy Creek Bequest, but we've had to break it out. It got too big for a single volume on print on demand. So the fourth book, which will be called The Boggy Creek Bequest, is interviews with two documentary filmmakers. Sean Whitley, who made a one-shot documentary called Southern Fried Bigfoot. I watched as many of these documentaries as I could get my hands on, Mike, and too many episodes of the very TV series you're talking about. And out of all of them, Southern Fried Bigfoot was the one for me that truly built upon the foundation that Charles Pierce had laid in 1972 with Legend of Boggy Creek. It's a wonderful self-contained documentary covering a number of the different southern United States Sasquatch-like creatures. They all have different names, you know, booger, swamp ape. I mean, there's countless names for these things.
There's really one
And
booger.
yeah, booger. I could hit you with more, but I won't. And Sean went to these locations, interviewed people, spoke to museum curators, spoke to park rangers, interviewed a few witnesses, and put together a pretty remarkable little, you know, it's about an hour and a half documentary that I highly recommend, Southern Fried Bigfoot. But the longest interview I conducted was with the amazing filmmaker, independent filmmaker, Seth Breedlove. And with a group of creative partners, Seth has made a procession of self-standing monster documentaries under the moniker Small Town Monsters. And to my mind, even more than what Sean did with Southern Fried Bigfoot, Seth and his compadres have truly carried on the tradition of what Charles B. Pierce kicked off with the Legend of Boggy Creek. They begin in areas that most people don't associate with Sasquatch. One of their first documentaries was shot in Whitehall, New York, just over the border
Yep.
from Vermont, where there have been reports of some sort of hominid, hairy humanoid ape-like creature in the woods. And if you drive into Whitehall, as my wife Marjorie and I did last year, there's, you know, metal sculptures and statues to this creature. And what Seth and his partners have done is they go to each of these places and they build their documentaries around the people who saw these things, or the, you know, or the children of the people who reported seeing these things. So those documentaries, to me, are at a much higher level of value and of filmmaking skill because they document regions and people as much as they do the cryptid lore. And that's really, again, one of the reasons I think Legend of Boggy Creek hit a nerve back in 1972 that nobody saw coming, which is, you know, I saw Legend of Boggy Creek at the Paramount Theater in downtown Barrie, Vermont. Everyone in northern Vermont, you know, has some sort of Vermont accent. We're watching a film about people in Folk, Arkansas, and even though their accents are very different than ours, we recognize those people. They're our neighbors, right? These are rural Americans. It is a we share a lot of common archetypes, and that's what Seth and the entire Small Town Monsters team continues to do. They travel to different parts of North America. They record first person narratives rather than trying to do stage some sort of fictional recreation. And they've built a remarkable library of cryptid documentaries, all by the same creative team and a few other partners that have gradually made their way into the fold and contributed to the Small Town Monsters library. Just terrific stuff, and it's available direct from Small Town Monsters on physical media, or they're available streaming through a number of platforms. highly recommend the Small Town Monsters documentaries.
Okay, so I got to watch those, and I got to watch Southern Fried Bigfoot too.
And I got to watch some Tom Tyler.
Okay, so um, uh, our viewers, when they see this, are probably going to come to an assessment that you and I, um, we will watch mainstream movies. We will talk about mainstream movie stuff, but the meat and potatoes is the stuff that I think that we have the same characteristics that we like bringing obscurity to light. We like taking material um, that maybe has not received the best kind of coverage because ultimately, I think both of us find big value, huge value in this material. Um, so I'm a kid. My we were living in Granby, Massachusetts. I was one of these kids, as Steve well knows. I would go to the newsstand and pick up Variety every time I could see it. By the way, I've got a big pile of varieties for you the next time
Oh,
we.
good. And we, by the way, folks, we did an entire podcast just focusing on those variety annuals that Mike is referring to. Check that out.
So I would buy famous monsters. I started doing that. The first famous monsters I ever bought was the Boris Karloff Memorial issue in 1969.
Ooh, you were late to the party, man.
Yeah, my mother wouldn't let it in the house. Simple as that. Just like she wouldn't let Mad in the house.
Yeah.
But there was another magazine, and this is the reason I got into Tom Tyler. It was called Larry Ivy's Monsters and Heroes. And Larry Ivy was an artist. He put together this magazine. It was a very personal kind of magazine about serials and Edgar Rice Burroughs. And he had his own character, Ultron Boy, that he was
Yep.
doing comic strips of. But he was the one that introduced me to the concept that there was this thing called Republic Pictures, and the best serial they ever made was this thing called The Adventures of Captain Marvel. I was barely aware as a comic book fan about there we go, the Captain Marvel comic book. Um,
Out of my collection, Captain Marvel, one of the Golden Age issues. Being who I am, I of course have the Dinosaur Dilemma issue because,
well,
gotta
yeah.
have it. But
Um,
yeah, Captain Marvel, the big red cheese.
and I went out and I bought one of those Super 8 millimeter cut downs. Uh, I bought one of because I was intrigued. What is this? And so I ran it, and that's the moment I fell in love not only with serials but with Republic Pictures and with Tom Tyler. And the more I started to read, it's like this guy had a fascinating career.
Now, Tom Tyler played Captain Marvel, just to explain the bridge to people.
Right. So here is an autographed picture of Tom and as Captain Marvel, the film that he made in 1940 for Republic Pictures, which was the first live action adaptation of an American comic book. Um, so anyway, I've been into this since high school. In college, I started earnest trying to do something about his story. For instance, when you're a kid, you have certain ideas about how things work, and then you find that they don't work at all. I assume that every cowboy star in Hollywood knew every other cowboy star, you know?
Sounds reasonable, right?
Well, yeah. So, I wrote to Colonel Tim McCoy, who was like probably in his late 80s, early 90s. And the colonel wrote me back, who was a big, big cowboy star. And he said, of course, I knew who Tom Tyler was, but I never got to work with him. I wrote, when I interviewed Buster Crabbe, I asked about Tom Tyler. And he says, well, we never were introduced, but I used to see him working out at the LA Athletic Club all the time. I wrote Lee Falk, the creator of the Phantom comic strip, because Tom also starred as the Phantom in the 1943 Columbia serial. He wrote back, because I asked him, what did you think of it? And this was a point where the only thing that existed for us was to see photos. The
Yeah,
serial
we couldn't see these films. Yeah.
the serial itself, its rights reverted back to King Features. Columbia didn't have the rights, and King Features wasn't doing anything with it. And Lee Falk told me, I never saw it. He never
He
saw it.
never saw the Phantom.
He never saw it. So I was trying to find people that I could talk to about and trying to figure out how I could write something. And so now, let's see, I graduated from college in 1976. It's 2005. So my projects have very long gestations. I mean, the Fleischer book was the same way. It's taken me a long time. But the thing about Tom is, I got some visuals here. So he started off in silent films. This is him with Frankie Darro, the great Frankie.
Whoa, a really young Frankie Darro. Wow.
He was 8 or 9 years old, and he was the co-star in the Tom Tyler westerns. This is
Tom and his pals.
Tom and the Pals, right? So Tom was a very successful silent film cowboy.
Successful enough to have a film named Tom and His Pals.
Oh yes, most of these FBO films are lost. FBO became RKO when RKO came into existence in 1929. Not only, I think, did they dump all of their library, but they also dumped all of their stars. So Tom Tyler was out of work. He really wanted to act. He just didn't want to be a cowboy star. But the industry, being the industry, forced him back to take cowboy star assignments. But he was a guy who people thought about him in a different way than cowboy stars. For instance, the F.W. Murnau film Taboo,
Oh, yeah.
Tom was going to star in it. In my research, I've got the notice in Hollywood trade papers about when Tom was going to get on a steamship. And what happened is that F.W. Murnau was working with, can't remember his first name.
Flaherty, Robert Flaherty.
Robert Flaherty.
The man who made Nanook of the North.
Right. They had a huge disagreement. So ultimately, Tom didn't get a chance to be in that film. Tom was also the runner-up to the replacement for Herman Brick's Bruce Bennett for Woody Van Dyke's Tarzan.
Oh, wow.
Woody Van Dyke, the director at MGM, went through a whole list of people. Clark Gable, Johnny Mac Brown. He said, Tom Tyler is the best, but he's not muscular enough. Now, which really struck me as odd because Tom Tyler was a AAU weightlifting champion. He actually established national amateur records, but he wasn't selected. Herman Bricks, who was an Olympian shot putter, field guy, was selected, and then Bricks seriously injured himself in an athletic event, and they turned to Weissmuller.
Johnny Weissmuller, who was an Olympic swimming champion.
So
it sounds like Woody was looking for lithe athletes, thin,
right,
well-built athletes, and that's why he gravitated to shot putters and swimming Olympic stars rather than weightlifters.
I know that Johnny Weissmuller is a god to Tarzan fans. I understand that. Frankly, as a kid, I loved those movies. But the few times that you ever saw Johnny Weissmuller in a non-Tarzan film, you realize
Jungle Jim,
not much of an actor.
Yeah. Also, we should point out, Taboo, the film that Tom Tyler was slated to be in, is spelled Tabu.
Right.
Since I don't want people to think it had anything to do with taboo, Taboo.
Right.
Very different.
So Tom went back into B westerns. Here's one of the films he made. This is like 1932 or 33.
Deadwood Pass.
And that's this guy is another western guy. This guy is Hal Taliaferro, also known as Wally Wales. And Hal Taliaferro was a Montana cowboy. He was the real freaking deal. Now, Tom was born in Port Henry, New York, which is, as you know,
right at the bottom of Lake Champlain. We've been to Port Henry before. Took the ferry over there. Yep.
He was a son of Lithuanian immigrants. They were working in the mines. Later on, the family moved to Detroit because they felt that working in the auto factories was better than working in mines, which I would certainly agree with. Um, Tom fell in love in acting, hitchhiked to California when he was about 22 years old. Um, but Tom wanted to act. It wasn't just being in cowboy movies. So he was in a succession of cowboy movies and then found himself as a freelancer. So he turns up in all sorts of interesting places. This is Brother Orchid, which is a great Edward G. Robinson picture.
And is that our first National Warner Brothers film?
Yep. And Tom
Yep.
is behind. You can see his face a little bit behind the police officer there,
Yep.
who's
Yep.
holding Ralph Bellamy. Um, Tom turns up at this period in films like Gone with the Wind. He
That's right.
he turns up as a villain in things. He turns up as Geronimo in Valley of the Sun with James Craig and Lucille Ball.
He turns up as Karis, the first Karis, the mummy, in The
That
Mummy's Hand.
he had an association with Universal in the early 30s. He made 4 consecutive serials for Universal. And I wonder if this was some sort of institutional memory on their part. Um, this is an original 1940 still,
Yep.
Tom. Now, I just want to point out if you can see his eyes are very prominent. Tom Tyler, as a silent actor, knew how to work his face in his eyes and his body. He was great in that. In the movie, they took his eyes out.
Yeah, yeah. John Fulton special effects. It's very creepy,
I
but it's like
still,
robbing the actor. I mean, suddenly Tom Tyler loses his primary tool of expression.
but then for me, it was like, does this mean that there's nothing there? Are we looking into the empty skull of Kareem?
Yeah,
It's a
yeah, it's really creepy.
disturbing and creepy image. I got one more still here. This is a good one. This is Jack Pierce
The great Jack Pierce. Yeah.
putting on the makeup. I should point out that after Tom did this film, the film was certainly successful. They had a whole group of what was I think 2 or 3 more.
Oh, they did 4 more.
Four more
And
Cheney
Lon Chaney Jr. was the actor that was slugged into the Karis role
except
thereafter.
he really wasn't because by that time they had developed a rubber mask.
Right.
And if you see those films, you see this film, you can see it's an actor with gunk on his face, but it's an actor. Um, the other films, and I really everything I've read is like I think stuntmen did a lot of the Cheney.
Yeah, Ed Parker and some of the other Universal stuntmen. However, The Mummy's Hand is still the best of that series. I just a year and a half ago rewatched them all in order, and The Mummy's Hand is far and away the best of those. And when I say Karis, I'm referring to Kharis, as differentiated from the original Boris Karloff mummy, Imhotep from the 1932 The Mummy.
The legend is that, and I've not yet seen confirmation of this, but the legend is that producers at Universal, and it would have been Ben Pivar, because
Yep.
it was his unit that produced The Mummy's Hand, thought that Tom Tyler, as in the Egyptian costume in the flashback, matched Karloff's look. Now they did match the costumes pretty much.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
of course, Karloff and Tom Tyler do not look anything alike. I mean, here's another example of him being in a film that B Western Cowboys don't come in. This is
Oh, wow.
and in this clip this is from a magazine ad. As you can see, he's featured.
Yep.
There at the bottom.
The talk of the town, George Stevens, the man who went on to make Giant.
Right. So this Talk of the Town, by the way, is a very interesting, odd film. It's part politics and civics. It's part romantic comedy. I mean, the cast is incredible. Cary Grant, Jean Arthur, who got her start at FBO being in a Tom Tyler Western, by the way.
Wow. Wow.
And Ronald Coleman. And Tom plays a pivotal role in the film. And geez, this really is so far flung from doing westerns for Sam Katzman
Yeah, you and I had long conversations about Sam Katzman, and Sam Katzman is one of the rabbit holes both you and I have fallen down. In fact, I was able to share some, pretty key Katzman material with you when you started down the Sam Katzman rabbit hole in the very different uh, arena of Tom Tyler's career, whereas my Sam Katzman hole was around Jungle Jim movies in the late 40s and especially early 50s. Um, but it was the same crazy Sam.
Right, and thanks to your nudging, I was able to find this article that ran on the UPA wire, United Press International wire, of a guy going to the set of Voodoo Man,
Yes, yes.
and Sam, in an amazingly candid moment,
Oh yeah, he didn't care.
talked about, well, the phrase was, "I make moron movies."
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Now, I'm really sure that performers like a Tom Tyler, performers like a John Carradine,
Yeah,
um,
they didn't want to hear about this moron movie
they
stuff,
really didn't want to hear about that. I think it's bad enough that they felt themselves stuck in the Sam Katzman
Well,
role.
although I have to add, for those of you who've never heard of or seen Voodoo Man, John Carradine does play a moron in Voodoo
Yeah,
Man. His hair is over his face, and he's essentially the village idiot being ordered around by George Zucco and Bela Lugosi. So, but Sam Katzman had the same candor about his Jungle Jim movies. I mean, he was just grinding them out. He didn't care. And I also steered you to that terrific article by another B director, Nick Grind,
yes, which
where he really laid out here's how these movies are put together and why.
yeah,
And
Nick Rind has a very long career making B films at a variety of studios, both
all
major.
genres, too. All genres. Yeah.
And so I'm reprinting that in the Tyler book, and that's actually way up at the beginning, um, because one of the initial things that people will read in the book is basically a glossary. I want people to understand a lot of the phrases because, Cine-Geezers, trademark Bassett and Dobbs, Cine-Geezers uh, have an understanding of some of the lingo and the way movies were made, the way movies were marketed. That are it's complete. It's a completely different language today than it was in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, even going into the 70s. But it was definitely in the late 70s, early 80s where so many things started changing. Um, so Tom did not give up working in westerns. Here he is as one of the three Musketeers,
Oh, yeah.
along with Bob Steele, and a guy who I never knew had a Western career. This is Jimmy Dodd
Jimmy Dodd.
from the Mickey Mouse Club. Um, he provides the comedy relief in one of the series. Um, the problem that Tom had is that Tom suffered from some health issues. Um, he did a lot of bit work, character work, um, past 1945. He was very fortunate that he had a benefactor. He had several benefactors. One of them was John Ford, who put him in Stagecoach, Drums Along the Mohawk. They were expendable. A great bit in She Wore Yellow Ribbon, which is one of my absolute favorite films.
Oh, terrific John Wayne, John Ford film. John Ford being the director, folks.
Right. And um, Ford was one of his mentors. Harry Sherman, who produced the Hopalong Costi films and other beef westerns at Paramount, like Tom, used him a fair amount. Um, and then toward the end of his life, he had another benefactor, Ron Ormond.
Oh, Ron Ormond, another rabbit hole both you and I have been down.
So,
Ron and June Ormond were a couple who made independent films, and Ron started out doing westerns with stars like Lash LaRue. And so Tom Tyler was part of that original entourage who popped up in some of the Ron Ormond films. I got interested in Ron Ormond for his later work, like the first American Sasquatch movie is actually The Exotic Ones from 1968, in which the great um, rockabilly star Sleepy LaBeef appears as the Swamp Thing, which is essentially a swamp booger found down in the Louisiana bayou, dragged to New Orleans, and put in a cage to perform a geek act. This is a long way away from the Ron Orman films that Tom Tyler was part of.
In fact, let me just put this back up. This was a group of 6 films shot back.
Fuzzy Night.
Huh?
Fuzzy Night.
Yes. Uh, so this was 6 films shot back to back with the same cast, with every film being different. So in other words, this is not like it starred Jimmy Ellison and Russ Hayden, who both had been in Hopalong Cassidy movies. Um, so it's 6 different stories with the same cast, with the same sets. The same female lead is billed here as Betty Adams. We know her better as Julie Adams.
Oh wow, the creature from the Black Lagoons.
The films,
First Love.
the films themselves are not bad. I mean, when you read that they did, these 6 movies back to back, like in one big hulk, um, they were very fortunate because the director for all the films was a guy named Tommy Carr, who was a veteran of Republic Pictures. Tommy Carr, his work is probably best known as the guy who was in charge of the first series of Superman, this first Superman series with George Reeves, the black and white ones.
Yep, yep. The Adventures of Superman from
They
early
are
50s.
they move in a different way than the subsequent color ones did.
Right.
Um, but Tom was very ill. He had an autoimmune disease with no cure. Still has no cure. By 1953, he had to move back home to Detroit. Lived with one of his sisters. He died on May 1st, 1954. And what I love about his story is that other B Western guys, they'd go up that roller coaster of success and popularity and then go right back down.
Yeah.
So huge performers like Hoot Gibson, Ken Maynard, there was no exit strategy for these guys.
No, the only ones, and Tom didn't live long enough to enjoy any of the possible fruits of it. The only ones who really went back into career ascent were the people like character Hopalong Cassidy, William Boyd, Roy Rogers, Gene Autry, who lucked into television.
Yes.
And,
Yep.
they were able to build an entire new career around cut down reruns of their programmers that they had done for the studios you've been researching. Films that were new in the 40s were chopped down to fit a 1 hour time slot, even a half-hour time slot, and launched entirely new careers for these performers and put them back into the stratosphere. But we're only talking about maybe 3 performers out of all the B Western stars that had enjoyed careers from the silent era up to the late 40s.
In one of the 2 obituaries that ran in the Detroit newspapers about Tom, one of them said that he was trying to raise money to buy rights to his old films. Now, I found out that the films he made for a producer named Bernard B. Ray for Reliable Pictures, a package of Reliable Pictures was first broadcast in 1949 on WPIX in New York. Tom Tyler, his name, along with some of these other guys, was being revived in the 50s. And just like Bill Boyd was smart enough to have bought the Hopalong Cassidy and produce a show, Autry, of course, being the businessman that he was, he very adroitly made the transition from B movies in the early 50s to TV. I mean, say what you want.
Oh, he was huge. He was huge.
Say what you want about Autry as a performer. He was never my favorite cowboy star by any means. He was a very smart businessman. He read the trends. Rogers, to a lesser extent, the same thing. And you're right. Along with Clayton Moore doing the Lone Ranger, I mean, for a lot of people, it was those guys: Boyd, Rogers, Autry, Moore. that we grew up seeing, because even when you and I were growing up, those things were being rerun constantly still.
Mike, I just, for research on an article I'm finishing up this week, I just had to pull out my TV feature source guidebooks, which were these huge catalogs provided to TV stations of syndication packages. And the volume I have that's for 1961, 1962, the entire back of the catalog is just Westerns, right? That's the only genre segregated into its own sector in this guide for regional TV station programmers so that they could still buy syndication packages of these vintage westerns you're talking about. And there's a lot of Tom Tyler listings in
Yeah.
there for films he starred and co-starred in. And I was stunned to see that. You would expect that by the 60s, the success of Shock Theater and Son of Shock as late night programming, the old Universal horror films and borderline horror films, that would have had prominence. Nope, it was still the Westerns in the early 60s that were really reigning the airwaves, not just with new programs like what I was talking about, but
Right.
with those very Westerns that you're now tracking down and buying from Alpha and from these different labels, trying to watch every Tom Tyler film. Most of that stuff was still in syndication into the 60s on regional TV stations.
Yeah, I've got catalogs from the 50s. I got one catalog from the 50s where it talks about, well, you can either rent these films for non-theatrical or you can buy them for your TV station. I mean,
Right.
there was all sorts of 16 millimeter prints of all of these low budget B westerns made in the 30s and 40s that became available. Um, so it's a fun thing. I'll just show a couple other things quickly. Um, there was a British publication called Boys Cinema.
Oh, I've got a few of those, and there's Tom Tyler and Riding Through.
So what Boys Cinema did is they took movies that supposedly appealed to boys. I often wonder if there was a girls' cinema too. I don't know.
I haven't found one. I've been looking.
And this is a novelization of this film. That's what.
Yeah, they're essentially film books, what Famous Monsters of Filmland later called film books, where they're not just a synopsis, it's written as a novella, essentially, the
Right. So
entire narrative of the
here
film.
you got stills from,
Yep.
and here's another thing, and it just also points out to um, the popularity of westerns, not just in the United States but around the world. So this is from Spain from the 1920s.
Oh, cool.
I've got several of these, and so these were sold at movie theaters,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and they are the same thing. They are a complete with stills here.
Yep.
They're a novelization of an FBO silent Tom Tyler Western. By the way, I'm going to in the book I'm going to reprint the entire Boys Cinema.
Oh, excellent.
So
I
people,
suspect boys' cinema was given the gender segregation because most film fan magazines of that era would have been targeting female readers, photo play and
yeah,
photo romance and so on. So most film fan magazines that existed during that period were specifically targeting women as their consumer base. Those are the readers they were aiming at. Boys cinema grew out of an era that your good friends, Alex and Richard Gordon, who, thanks to you, Marge and I got to know a bit, they used to talk very fondly of those kids' matinees that they went to. And that's what a magazine like Boys Cinema was aimed right at, were
yeah.
those kids,
In fact, Richard gave me a wonderful anecdote about Tom's Universal serial Clancy of the Mounted. Um, he said, which by the way only exists, half of the chapters exist, like the first six chapters.
And the rest is gone, can't
The
be
rest is
found.
gone at this point.
Right, right.
Who knows where it is? In any event, he said that the response from the British kids to Clancy of the Mounted was so bad that by the midway through the the run of the serial, the theater manager acquiesced to the kids and dropped it.
Oh, oh, that's not very complimentary now, is
Uh,
it?
but I have to say, I've seen the first six chapters, and uh, I enjoyed it for for it being a 1932-33 Universal serial. Um, it has it basically takes a Western story and positions it in
As a Mountie story.
right.
Right,
Um,
right. The Great North.
so instead of the Great Plains and shooting it at Iverson Ranch with the rocks and stuff, you're
Right.
shooting it someplace with woods. Um, it does have an actor with the absolute worst French Canadian accent you have ever heard.
I've heard some bad ones. I look forward to
This one's
experiencing it.
really terrible. But Tom looks great as a Mountie. He was a tall, handsome.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, he would look great in that uniform.
looks
So
great as a Mountie, and in fact, that was the second time he did a movie as a Mountie. But I'm working my way through this. I think that the writing of it is going to be done by the first week of June, and then we will do the editing, and I will have to have a marathon time scanning stuff for our
yep.
friend Mark Mastel, who works on books that Steve has done and works at.
Yeah, Mark edited as well as designed my sketchbooks. We did two of them so far. The first was Thoughtful Creatures, and the second one was Brooding Creatures. These are also available print on demand from Amazon. And Mark is well, he's a great friend to both of us, and Mark is a terrific artist and designer and an author in his own right.
Yep.
He's been doing his own cryptid novels with his shark novels, Blood
Yes.
in the Water being the first one, which you and I co-star in.
Yes. We
So,
do.
although I've somehow become a female in it, I'm not sure how that worked, but I survived,
You might
which
want
is
to have a discussion with Mark.
no, it's okay. I'm still alive at the end of the novel. I don't want to rock the boat. No pun intended.
No,
Um,
understand.
well, you're more organized with your writing than I am. Tim Paxton and I are, as you and I speak, working our way through designing the third Cryptid Cinema book, which is a book of filmographies. Two filmographies, fully illustrated. One filmography is of actual cryptid films from the 1890s to 1972. I'm using Boggy Creek as my cutoff. And a companion filmography of cryptid companion films. These are films that aren't really cryptids, but sort of blur, like Dr. Moreau's Manimals, surgically created humanoids, um, uh, films that involve dimensional creatures crossing over, as in the 1970 film Equinox, where you can't really call them cryptids. They're not like, natural creatures that have not been tagged by science yet. These are occult beings or interdimensional beings who cross over. That book, hopefully, knock on wood, will be out before the end of summer. And I've also been writing for magazines like Scream. The most recent issue, Scream number 43, I wrote the cover story about Creature from the Black Lagoon, Del Toro's The Shape of Water, which I referenced earlier in the conversation here, and a forgotten Russian science fiction film, The Amphibian Man, which also provided some of the narrative elements that Guillermo del Toro wove into The Shape of Water. In America, The Amphibian Man is essentially forgotten today, but it was the biggest box office hit in Russia. And that it held that record from 1962 until 1974 as the top grossing feature film in Russia. Um, so anyway, I will continue exploring my rabbit holes, manifesting in the Cryptid Cinema books and also articles that I've been fortunate enough to do for a number of magazine publishers. And Mike, your Tom Tyler book will be coming out later this year as a self-contained entity, all in one, with a lot of great stuff in the book.
I hope I. My goal is just to give the guy what he deserves, and
There you go.
you
Shall
know,
we recommend something we've read recently as our outro for this episode?
um, why yes.
I can start if you'd
You
like.
start. I'm going to go to my bookcase and grab something.
Okay. My choices for this episode that I want to recommend to you all is since Mike was talking about the adventures of Captain Marvel, the 1940 Republic serial Tom Tyler starred in that launched um, motion picture adaptations from comic books, I thought I would reach into recent graphic novels that I can recommend. And I'm going to recommend two. Both of these are horror centric, although they're not straight horror comics per se. My current favorite horror comic is Jay Stevens' Dwellings.
Okay.
And what Jay does is he writes and draws these amazing horror comics, original stories in the style of the Harvey comics, Richie Rich,
Oh yeah, yeah.
you know, Casper the Friendly Ghost, Wendy the Good Little Witch. But these are full blown horror stories. And Jay Stevens' Dwellings is my number one favorite horror comic right now. I also want to recommend a brand new graphic novel by Steve Thusen that's called The Night Never Ends. As the subtitle self-defines it, it's a horror comedy, and it's essentially Steve doing his slasher movie, and it is it is very funny. There are laugh out loud passages in The Night Never Ends, but it's also a pretty great consolidation of a lot of the horror movie tropes that we're still seeing pop up in films like Longlegs and so on. Inevitably, a satanic cult comes to the fore. So those are my two recommendations this session. Dwellings, The Night Never Ends. Check them out.
So, in my effort to do the most complete job that I can for Tom Tyler, um, I've been buying a number of books. Um, this one is out there, and it's well worth reading.
Oh,
It's
wow.
it's a biography of uh, Frankie Darro, written by this guy. He's a very nice guy, um, John Glosky. John Glosky was like a teenager movie fan who was connected with Frankie Darro, and they became friends in the last few years of Darro's life. Um, other people have talked to me about Frankie Darro, most notably Frank Coughlin Jr., who played Billy Batson in The Adventures of
Oh,
Captain Marvel, who had a very long career as a kid actor. Um, and Frank uh, extolled Frankie, said he was just an incredible actor. If you've ever seen the movie Public Enemy with Jimmy Cagney,
oh, yeah.
Frank Frank Coughlin plays the Cagney character as a kid. Frankie Darro plays the other adult character whose name now I can't remember. But nonetheless, they acted together. They knew each other. This is a really good read, and it's a sad read because Darrow had a very rough life, was an alcoholic, and alcoholism is really what killed him.
Uh,
Here's another book that I read that I got. I believe it was on your recommendation, Steve.
oh,
Talk.
yeah.
Okay, so this film by by Mark Thomas McGee. This book is all about Robert Lippert, and the reason I needed to get this going is because Lippert had a deal with Ron Ormond. The six movies that Ormond made with Tom, these were films that were released by Lippert, and Lippert is a very another one of these guys, Cine-Geezers, trademark Dobbs. Um, Cine-Geezers will know who he is, but his career in movies as a producer was relatively short. He was a guy who owned movie theaters, and he decided that a movie theater owner should make movies that he felt would be guaranteed money makers for other theater owners. When you see his trade ads, that's what they say. That's exactly what they say.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. He
It's not about art. This isn't about art.
talks cheap, action's expensive. That title sums up the Robert Lippert aesthetic right there.
Of course,
But we should add, his career actually spanned almost 2 decades.
right.
And he was not able to put his name on his most successful film. Robert Lippert was the first Hollywood producer to sell a package of his feature films into television syndication. And it was right when the Actors Guild was beginning to wrestle with how do we make sure actors get residuals
Right.
for the ongoing use of their work in this brand new media of broadcast television. Lippert, being Lippert, basically said, screw off. You're not getting anything from me. These are my movies. I'm selling them into syndication. He was blackballed by the Actors Guild. And by 1958, he was producing under a company logo a group of CinemaScope films for 20th Century Fox. But because of his being blackballed by the Actors Guild, Fox had to kind of disguise this relationship. And the Lippert films that were released widescreen, like Kronos and She Devil, were in Regal Scope, right, which was CinemaScope. His biggest hit was Kurt Newman's The Fly.
Yep.
He could not put his name on it because of the Actors Guild blackballing of Lippert. He ultimately forged a relationship with Exclusive Films in the UK. Exclusive Films became Hammer Films by the early to mid 50s. And it was Lippert who was responsible for finding American actors who could appear in these British quota films, right? Actors like, oh, Forrest Tucker,
Well,
Brian Donlevy, Howard Duff.
I,
All
I,
they would need is,
I need to interject.
oh, yes, please do.
The other guy who was doing that was Richard Gordon.
That's right. That's right. Exactly.
Because Richard Gordon told me about how he got Pat O'Brien to be in one of these things. These were not horror films. A lot of them were like crime
Oh,
dramas.
yeah, they were crime films. A lot of them were based on radio programs and
And,
so on.
he had been warned, Richard had been warned that Pat O'Brien, Pat O'Brien was just a lush at that point in his career. Maybe he was a lush the entire time of his career. And that to expect problems. And Richard told me he was very, very happy when the British producers told him that Pat O'Brien was the complete professional and gentleman. They never had any difficulty with him in making this film. But I find Lippert another one of these,
Yeah.
these entrepreneurs that could exist in the movie industry at that time, whereas today being an entrepreneur in the movie industry is a perilous road to take.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we ought to wrap up.
Yeah. Cine-Geezer Bissett signing off.
And we will we're going to I'll tell you what we're going to be taping next, folks. We're going to be taping next a discussion about a new movie that Steve and I are in love with.
A brand new movie. These are Cine-Geezers who risked going into a contemporary movie theater and experienced a new film that had not been seen by human eyes until just recently. So,
all right. So we will be back. Thank you for watching Cine-Geezers.